What if everything we've been told about autoimmunity is wrong? I'm Elizabeth Yarnell. After awakening partially blind one morning in 1999, a doctor told me my multiple sclerosis would put me in a wheelchair within 10 years. I refused to accept that as the end of the story, so I started investigating. Welcome to the Inflammation Investigator, the podcast that uncovers the inflammation lurking underneath your ailments. Because autoimmune and chronic conditions should not be viewed as death knells when they are actually alarm bells. I'm a traditional naturopath and founder of the Inflammation Academy. And in 2 episodes every week, we dig into what conventional medicine might be missing. If you're living with chronic or unexplained symptoms, this investigation is for you. Your body has been trying to tell you something. Let's start listening. Welcome to this episode of the Inflammation Investigator. And today, my guest might be someone that you've heard of before or someone that you've encountered somewhere online because he seems to be everywhere these days with his food revolution. And I cannot wait to dig into it and introduce you all to Ocean Robbins. So, Ocean Robbins, thank you so much for coming on today.
My privilege. Thank you, Elizabeth. It's great to be with you.
So you may know about Ocean Robbins, but I'm going to read you a little bit of background and then we're going to get into his story in his own words. But Ocean Robbins is the co-founder and CEO of the million-member Food Revolution Network, which champions healthy, ethical, and sustainable food for all. A best-selling author and TEDx speaker, he's dedicated to empowering people to make healthier choices for themselves and the planet. His books include The 31-Day Food Revolution and Powered by Plants. So, Ocean, I'm going to turn it over to you. Maybe you can tell us about how did you get here? Because this is not where your family started.
Well, I was born into a family of health nuts, but my dad wasn't. My grandpa founded an ice cream company called Baskin and Robbins, and my dad John grew up with lots of ice cream, and in time an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool in the backyard. And he was his my grandpa hoped my dad would follow a similar path, but my dad followed his own rocky road, as we put it in our family. He ended up moving with my mom to a little island off the coast of Canada where they built a one-room log cabin and grew most of their own food, practiced yoga and meditation for several hours a day, and named their kid Ocean. They almost named me Kale. This is way before Kale was cool, but thankfully they took the more conservative route when they named their kid. But we did eat a lot of kale and cabbage and carrots and other veggies from the garden. As I got a little older, my family moved to California, and my dad came out with a book called Diet for a New America in 1987. It became this runaway bestseller and inspired millions of people to look at food as a chance to make a difference with their lives and in the world. So it's been quite an interesting journey, and for myself, I grew up really inspired by the impact my dad was making and seeing really powerfully the impact of food as my dad received thousands of letters from people who had been inspired by his work and felt it had saved their lives. So fast forward to 2012, I launched Food Revolution Network with my dad, and we grew to over 1 million members is where we are today. My dad passed away in June of 2025. And I think now the torch that he carried is in all of our hands. So I feel honored and grateful to carry that mission forward. And I don't think it's just in the hands of a few elite leaders or spokespeople or experts. I honestly think the food revolution is something we're all part of when we choose real food over processed junk, when we make food the foundation of our health, when we act like food matters and try to bring our food choices into alignment with our values. And all of us get to do that, every day.
You are absolutely right. And I think it's something that we tend to forget in this world of grocery stores and the distance that we each have from our food that we eat. And that's on our table every night. It's too easy to forget that it's actually grown somewhere and that it does more than just nourish us a food. It is the provider of all health. I
Yeah.
do want to say I am sorry about your father. I know you guys were very close and that he had a tremendous impact. So I know that's very tough. But
Thank
you've
you.
gone on and you are moving forward. So what is the essential message of the food revolution?
Well, the central message is that you can take charge of your health 3 times every day, um, by making choices that align with your values, and the thing is that we live in a toxic food culture. The way I look at it, food 1.0 is about survival. If you can get enough calories to fill your belly, that is success. Food 2.0 is about commerce, the buying and selling of goods, and it brings us a huge range of taste and texture and cuisine and opportunity. But unfortunately, in the industrialized world, food 2.0 has no moral compass. So it's actually killing us, and it's killing our planet, and it's a source of enormous destruction, um, causing us hundreds of billions of dollars in medical care costs that never needed to happen, and ending so many lives prematurely, which is why I'm calling for a food 3.0, which is governed by health for our bodies and health for our planet. And there are healthy profits to be made in food 3.0. It's just that they come from healthy food. So that's the cornerstone. And then the core principles are, eat real food, not processed junk, um, eat more plants, whole grains, legumes, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds are all linked with longevity and reduced risk of disease. Um, and source consciously. That is to say, if you can go with fair trade, organic, local, you're investing in a healthier food economy. Stay away from factory farms. Stay away from, GMOs if you can, and focus on food that is grown in a way that restores soil, that's kind to farm workers and farmers, that is kind to animals, that's aligned with whatever your values really are. And when we do that, our lives get better. We can slash our risk of cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, type 2 diabetes and obesity. We can reduce inflammation. We can feel better and live longer. There was a study in PLOS Medicine a few years ago which found that moving from a typical diet to an optimal diet, even as late as the age of 60, can add 8 more healthy years of life. Healthy years of life. And and then even at the age of 80, you could add 3. If you start sooner than 60, you might be able to add 11 or even more. That's just diet. And then when you add the other pillars of lifestyle medicine, which are stress less, love more, and move more, then you have incredible power to not just live longer, but live so much better.
I think that's such a great point. In America, we vote with our dollars, right? We support the things that we by purchasing the foods that we support with our money, then we create more demand, and then there's more food in that way that's produced, and there's more options for the rest of us. I gave a TEDx talk myself in 2014 called Poisons in Our Everyday Food about all of these chemicals and additives and preservatives that are omnipresent in our food supply everywhere because it is almost impossible to avoid unless you
Yeah.
become very aware or, as you mentioned, you stick with whole foods versus processed foods, which is another one of my own core tenets as well, because that is really almost the only way to keep yourself clean and free from all of these additives and preservatives that are put in our food supply, except for that pesky GMO problem that you mentioned.
Yeah, well, going organic is the best way to avoid GMOs, because then you're also avoiding all kinds of neurotoxic pesticides, all the fungicides and herbicides and insecticides, that are widely used in agriculture today. Of course, there are chemicals that are used in organic agriculture, but there's less, and they're less toxic. Um, and you can also go non-GMO certified if you're trying to avoid GMOs. The big reason to avoid genetically modified organisms is that they've been engineered to withstand glyphosate and other herbicides. So that means they can be sprayed with toxins that kill weeds but don't kill these plants. And those some of those herbicides are probably endocrine disruptors and carcinogens. And so, when you are able to steer clear of GMOs, it's really about that pesticide exposure. But to be clear, glyphosate's also sprayed on wheat and oats as a desiccant to dry out the crop before harvest. So really, you want to try to go organic with your wheat and your oats too if you're trying to get away from glyphosate, which could be one of the more dangerous compounds in the world today.
Yes, there's been such a whitewashing of the whole genetically modified plants in our government that's just been appalling to watch, and how they have tried to say, oh, well, the industry doesn't really want you to know if there is genetically modified organisms in your foods because why? Because they're scared you'll choose not to eat them, of course, which
Right.
as we believe you should not. So you mentioned how if you change your diet, you can actually add years to your life. Let's talk a little bit about how our common American diet leads to chronic health issues.
Well, we know that when you eat processed foods, there's a lot of reasons why that's problematic. One is that nature just seems to work well. Like every whole food has multiple compounds, and our bodies were designed as if miraculously to absorb those compounds and to to absorb them as a symphony, right? So processed food tends to take parts out and mix and match other parts as if food was a chemical. And the truth is we're smart chemists when it comes to making things that have the right mouthfeel or the right amount of crunch or will last a long time in a package. But we're not smart chemists when it comes to understanding how Creator designed us to consume foods that actually nourish us optimally. So when you separate that out, you get problems. So some of those problems are ultra processed foods tend to be lower in fiber. For example, we're stripping out the bran and the germ from wheat or other grains and just getting the endosperm, and that is losing a lot of the fiber, which is critical to human health. They tend to be higher in added sugars and in sodium, both of which are highly problematic for lifespan, for cardiovascular health. They tend to be pro-inflammatory. They tend to be higher in saturated fats like palm oil, high-fat products, animal products that are linked with increased cardiovascular disease risk, higher LDL cholesterol levels, higher blood pressure, etc. So when you eat ultra processed foods, you're generally getting more of the sodium and the saturated fats and the sugars and less of the fiber. That's at a very basic chemical level. But there are ultra processed foods that manage to stay, they add a little extra fiber powder and they manage to stay a little lower on the sodium and the saturated fat, and they're still not healthy. And we're still figuring out why. It could be literally that one of the things that happens with ultra processed foods is that they cease to be needing as much chewing. So it may be that saliva is a critical part of digestion and human health. And so ultra processed foods where you don't chew as much because you just swallow it fast, that may actually negatively impact your health outcomes. So those are all reasons why ultra processed foods are considered highly problematic today. And so and then on the flip side, you want to eat whole plant foods. Every time you're eating ultra processed food, you're missing an opportunity to get something wonderful in your body. Our food is always about replacement, right? So I'm always encouraging folks to not just avoid the bad stuff, but crowd it out with the good stuff. Instead of focusing on not eating the chips, focus on eating the vegetables. Fill yourself up on good stuff, and you will not necessarily have the cravings for the junk food. So those are some key principles. And then animal products are problematic. Generally speaking, they're high sources of saturated fat. They, of course, industrialized animal products also come with a lot of hormones and antibiotics and various pathogens, antibiotic resistant bacteria, a whole host of problems that can come there. But animal products in general tend to be linked with more problematic health outcomes, particularly red and processed meats, which are associated with cardiovascular disease risk as well as decreased longevity and higher risk of cancer. So, you want to focus on loading up with the whole plant foods. Vegetables are incredibly good. They're loaded with phytonutrients of all kinds, antioxidants, flavonoids, polyphenols that nourish your body, that fight cancer, that bring down inflammation, that help you feel better and live longer. And then, legumes, which are a great source of protein and lots of vitamins and minerals that we need for our well-being. Fruits, remarkably enough, if there was one food group that was most consistently associated with longevity, it was fruit. Amazing, right? Apparently we could end about 5 million premature deaths per year worldwide just by eating more fruit. So that's not a hard sell. Just about everybody likes fruit. Um, and believe it or not, it's even good for diabetes control. Now, fruit juice is not, but fruit is whole fruit, where you chew
Right,
it, right? So,
right.
so a lot of great, great, wonderful things. And the thing I love to celebrate is that, you don't have to be some kind of an ascetic or a Puritan or feel like you're in food prison to enjoy healthy food. There's an incredible array of delicious, healthy foods, and you can learn to fall in love with foods that love you back.
That's such a good point. One of the things I hate watching are all of these fad diets that really demonize an entire food group, like legumes or fruits, things like that, and tell us that we need to take those completely out of our diet, which is not really how we evolved on this
That's
planet
right.
to thrive. So I appreciate that you pointed that out. Thank you. What is it that you are most excited about with your work? What is coming up?
I just think that there's a lot of chaos in the world right now, and um, it can be overwhelming to face. Um, I think the less we can control out there, the more important it is to take charge of what we can rather than just sort of giving up, throwing in the towel. And it's like you may only be a drop in the bucket, but get your drop in the right bucket. And so one of the places where we have immense power is with our food choices. And every kid knows that when they refuse to open their mouth when their parent wants to feed them something. Like they learn really early, like, oh my gosh, I get to choose what I eat. And that's so important. And yet, unfortunately, a lot of us aren't really the author of our food lives. We're
Mm,
actually biologically and psychologically addicted to eating patterns that are killing us. So
mhm.
breaking free from that so you can take charge, so you can make food choices that align with your own values and your own best interests is profoundly important. And I think it's never been more important. And in some ways, the more difficult things get out there, the more important it is to make things well in here. And you do that every day with your knife and fork when you choose to eat foods that will nourish you, that you can feel good about. When you look back at the end of the day, you could say, I took care of myself today. I nourished myself well, and I'm proud of that. And that builds a positive feedback loop that is so profound. So I'm really excited right now about helping people to feel some sense of agency over their life and journey. And food gives us that. There's new drugs coming out. They always have side effects and problems. And but food is something where all the side effects are good ones. And food can be medicine in the best possible way. An ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. Nobody wants to get sick in the first place. And they say a person with their health has got 1,000 dreams. A person without their health has only got one dream, which is to get their health back. So I like to think I'm in the 1,000 dreams business.
Oh, I really like that. We shouldn't omit letting people understand that our food, our food industrialized complex is invested in keeping you addicted to their food. So there's a lot of chemicals, there's a lot of scientists, there's a lot of money behind keeping you addicted to those unhealthy foods. And when you break free and you move to more whole foods and actual real foods as opposed to processed foods, that is absolutely liberating, not only for yourself, but for the entire environment and economy that we live in. There are
Yeah.
so many benefits and there are so many places where it stretches out and reaches into. So I know that you have a bunch of books, you've done a bunch of summits and docuseries and all sorts of things like that to get this message out. And to have over 1 million strong in your organization, that's quite an accomplishment. Hopefully, we will see some changes in our own food supplies in this country. I know that there are lots of other countries in the world that have resisted going down this path in the way that we have. And even our food manufacturers, they might sell the same product, say in the United States, that they sell in Europe, but they have a different formulation that they do in Europe because Europe doesn't allow many of the additives and preservatives and colors and flavors that are so omnipresent in our food supply and that we have grown accustomed to expecting. Whoever taught us that food should be fluorescent colored, right?
Well, we've made food into entertainment instead of nourishment. And, it can be entertaining, but it should be nourishing first, because this is our lives we're talking about here. And, you know, that's why you want to love foods that love you back and not love foods that will torment you and cause you harm, right? Because at the end of the day, there's no pleasure in a cancer diagnosis. There's no pleasure in being on dialysis. There's no pleasure in even in having to take blood pressure medications, much less having surgery, much less premature death. So I think that we want to cultivate pleasure through healthy pleasures, through nourishing foods. And there's a lot of pleasure that comes from feeling like you're caring for yourself consciously and intentionally. And where does the rubber meet the road? What about protein? What about inflammation? What about, folks who are going through chemo? What about folks who are, have stubbornly high cholesterol, even though they're doing everything right? What about critical vitamins and minerals? Should you take any supplements? If so, which ones and when? What about later stages of life? What about women and bone health and all the women who are postmenopausal women dealing with osteoporosis today? So we kind of dig into all of these topics and share resources and tools and also action steps to help people move from knowing what to do to doing what they know. And so some of the resources are, if you go to foodrevolution.org, you can find all of our courses, master classes, summits available there. We have articles on, hundreds and hundreds of critical food and health topics. We have an email newsletter, and I have a book, 31-Day Food Revolution: Heal Your Body, Feel Great, and Transform Your World. And it really is the action plan for putting all this into work in your life. So all of these are resources we've created. Bottom line is, you're a food revolutionary every time you choose to be. Every time you choose real food over processed junk. Every time you say no to factory farmed animal products and eat more whole plant foods, I think you're part of the solution. You're taking charge of your health, and you're also contributing to a healthier food economy and a healthier future for life on Earth.
I love that. I love that you went from 31 flavors to 31 days of healthy eating. So it couldn't be even better than that. Thank you so much, Ocean, for coming on today. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're very busy, and we appreciate all of this insight into what's going on in our food world. And that is such a crucial link to inflammation and what's going on in our bodies. So thank you. Thank you.
My privilege. Thanks for having me on.
And that's another case filed on the Inflammation Investigator. Remember, every symptom is your body's way of communicating. We just need to learn the language. If today's episode sparked something for you, I want to hear about it. Share your own investigation discoveries with me on social media at Elizabeth Yarnell, or find me at elizabethyarnell.com. Your experience could be exactly what another listener needs to hear. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And here's the thing about investigations: they work best when you're not going it alone. If this podcast is helping you uncover the answers you've been searching for, please like, rate, subscribe, and review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. As a new podcast, these actions mean more than you know. Want to dive deeper into your own inflammation investigation? Head over to inflammationinvestigator.com, where you can take my free inflammation quiz to uncover which hidden triggers might be affecting your health. Until next time, this is Elizabeth Yarnell, your inflammation investigator, reminding you that the solutions to your health issues are out there. Let's find them together.